Welcome to part 4 of our I Am Here workshop called Stitches or Stitching. I'd like to show you a few things to give you some ideas. I'm not going to cover everything in your notes, but I will give you some ideas on what you can do with your own work. So far it's all been preparation, making backgrounds whether by eco-printing or collage or painting with dirt paint, and now you should be ready for stitching. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, with paper it's probably better if it's quite simple, and I think I have showed you this before. This one here I've only done some fairly basic stitching, running stitch here with some random stitching there, more running stitch, some stab stitch, and then this was some random long stitches which was based on some scribbles that I did with a piece of charcoal. So it doesn't have to be anything too fancy. In fact, as we've said before, simple is probably better. I've started some more stitching on this one, which I will tell you about in a minute. But that's some of the basic things that you can do and do variations of. The word only has long stitches over the top because I didn't want to just outline it. And this idea I really did like. I've done that on another one, set of collages as well, this time in red, and I've done them just to balance each other out diagonally opposite on the piece that I've got here. I also did some back stitch, which is by hand, some long stitches randomly again, and some running stitch, and then some more back stitch, and I think that's enough for this one. This one also variations of the same kind of thing. The long stitches in red, back stitch, running stitch, and so on. And this one also. And you can see that this is kind of like a little series of 3 pieces of work. So they're there to add texture and visual impact, not necessarily to overwhelm the whole composition. They all complement one another. This is another set of 3, which are like a little series, and I've done similar things. I've just used back stitch, some long stitch, and some seed stitch on this one, which is just short little stitches arranged randomly over the page. Sometimes I've followed the lines of the collage, for example on the text paper here. Sometimes I accentuated something that was on the background, in this case a rusty item that was eco-printed on the paper. This had a bit of variation in the soil paint, and plus the shape of this circle, so I echoed that with the stitching. And this one also I've done some long or stab stitching, some back stitch, some seed stitch. Again, nothing too complicated. I did mention in one video to do with composition that you might like to use a shape that you've drawn or photocopied as a pattern for stitching. This is one of a pot, based on a photo of a pot, which I have here. And that was this photo, which I drew from memory without looking. And I thought maybe I could use that on one of these dark collages that I've done. This is quite dark because of the soil paint, but also because I did it with shellac. So I think what I could do is I could just lay this on top and draw around it in pencil. It might be difficult to see on the video. I'll show you in a minute. So just draw around it as a guide for your stitching. And I think for this I would probably just use a back stitch. If your background is very dark, you might like to try a white pencil. This I can barely see, but it's enough for me to follow for stitching. And if I wanted to, maybe I could, instead of just having the one shape, I could actually overlap it a little bit and put it on the top as well and have 2 overlapping shapes. So that's a possibility for that one. The other one that I thought about was based on a photo of a flower that I took, which was a dried protea flower that's sitting on our dining table in a vase. So I've enlarged that, as I've shown you before, and then cut it out. And because the petals didn't finish because the photograph cut it off, I actually continued the petal shapes outwards, and when I turn it over you'll see that it looks more realistic that way. And what I've done is I've actually used it to draw some lines on this piece like that. So I didn't use the whole shape, I just wanted to accentuate that part. So I've traced around it with pencil. I don't know if you can see it, but the lines in pencil go around like that. And I've started to stitch it with a back stitch, if I can get hold of my needle, along here. And I just wanted to show you how I do this. I usually just use my needle. So I go a few stitches ahead of myself, around the same distance apart each time. And then I've got enough to go on. So I'm going back into the hole of the previous stitch, and then going back out from the back to the front, and then back into the previous stitch, the hole of the previous stitch again. Don't pull it too tight because you could tear your paper, but pull it snugly, and then in the hole on the back, and then back again. So this is a good way to do it if you are just sewing with the needle as you go along, and I can just do the holes a few holes ahead of time. That way I know that I've got the holes where I want them, and I know I can see at the back where I have to go, because it's hard to tell otherwise. The other way you can do this, if you have an awl that's used for bookbinding, you can actually lay it on a mat and do all your holes ahead of time with the awl. But I quite like doing it this way, where I just do a few ahead. If you want to do a straight line, as I've done here, all you need to do is use your ruler and pencil to draw a line, and the stitch will cover it up, so you don't have to worry about the pencil line showing or having to rub it out. And then you just go along with your needle and stitch the holes. I did the same technique with this. I just did a few stitches, pricked a couple more holes with the needle, and then did a few more stitches, and that seemed to be a really simple way to do it. So that's about it, except for the threads. I did mention about threads, to try and use different thicknesses and either a wide variety of colours or a limited range of colours. And I decided for all of mine, that's all of the different series that I've done, to use just these 4 colours. So it's like a country red or a dusty red, a black, a pale grey and a brown, and they're the ones that I've used for all of them. But in doing this one with the flower shape on it, I thought I need something a little bit darker, but not as dark as the black, so I did add in this darker grey. And once again, just keeping it fairly simple, not too complicated. Please do feel free to ask questions online via our new Facebook page. Share your photos. Don't worry if they're not perfect or if you're not happy with them. We're learning together, and hopefully we can give encouragement and positive suggestions when we get stuck. I did send the link to you in my last email to you. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what your results are, and just remember also it's about the process, not only about the finished product. Have fun and enjoy. Bye.